So welcome, and it would be really nice to know where you're joining from today. If you are happy to just type in the chat, and it's nice to feel a connection. I know some are from the States and some from north of England, south of England, maybe Europe. So warm welcome. And you can also interact as we go through. This session is meant to be like a meeting, and also a chance to learn from each other, and feel welcome to come into camera if you wish to. It'd be really nice. And so, yeah, this subject, understanding the mind, and just pulling up some thoughts here. This is a quote from the Gita. Your mind is your greatest friend if you control it, and it's also your greatest enemy if it controls you. We can kind of relate to this aspect. It's like an amazing gift, but who is in charge? But on a positive feeling, that even from this session, this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said, "The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions." So it's like very interesting how the mind is learning and growing all the time. I think in science they have new understanding about how we actually are changing, and certainly at brain level, but certainly our understanding, it grows. So to discuss and explore these subjects, I'm going to first welcome Neville, and just share a little bit about Neville for those who don't know. Background: medical and science correspondent for the Sunday Times, and author of Will to Be Well. And he has authoritative insights on the subject of mind and matter. So just going to say hello and welcome, let you also unmute here. So it's nice to have you with us. And I think currently joining from Worthing, but soon to be moving back to Oxford, if I understand correctly.
That's right. Yes. Hello, Sarah. Hello, everyone.
Very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you've had a busy schedule, so it's a great, very happy you could make it. And also adding in Prashant, and background in ENT surgery, integrated health, interested in psyche, emotions, behavior, and health. So very nice to have both of you with us. And so I think we're going to hear from each of you, just sort of 5 to 10 minutes, your initial kind of response to this subject of understanding the mind, and then we're going to open it up to more of a discussion. So maybe we can start with Neville. It would be nice to hear what this topic is meaning to you right now. Of course, these things are evolving all the time.
It's true. I've been on quite a long journey from great ignorance about my mind and me to, I think, eventually the penny dropped that that the mind is a faculty which, as your quote from the Gita said, if I control it, then it's a great friend. It took me a long time to really grasp that, because I think as long as you're not understanding that the mind is not the same as the brain and the body, then you're still dictated to by the brain and the body a lot of the time. But if you make the mental shift, a bit like your second quote, if you can really make the mental shift to understand that the brain and the body are secondary to the mind, then it really becomes a much more natural empowerment, whereby you can make choices about what goes into the mind, what you allow into it. And I'm reminded, I'm sure most of you have heard the story, but I think I'd like to mention it at the outset, because it's so so valuable that that story about the American Indian elder who was asked by his grandson about the mind, and he said, well, it's like there are two wolves in my head, one of which loves positive qualities and really things like appreciation, love, positivity, self-respect, and the other one is very negative in nature and with things like oversensitive, emotional, jealous, angry, many things that are, not so good. And the little boy is listening to this and said, well, which one wins? And of course the grandpa says, the one you feed. And it really is like that. When I first was becoming more introspective and reflective some 40 years back, it was a new idea to me that it was even possible to make choices about how one would think and feel. That in itself was valuable to learn that, and I was able to make a start on addressing negative tendencies and sort of gradually overcoming those by feeding the mind with more positive thoughts. But it took time before real empowerment started to develop, because I don't believe that you can just sort of have positive thoughts of lasting value and lasting effect unless you really believe them. And so that shift from thinking of myself in very materialistic ways to understanding that actually at my core I am mind and consciousness, and therefore I'm distinct from the brain and the body, which may be giving me impulses of both kinds, positive and negative, depending on past experiences. When I really understood the difference between that inner self and the material side, of course they're deeply interlinked, but when that penny dropped, I really am distinct. That made a huge difference to my ability to make choices so that I would feed the mind. I've learned to feed the mind with those positive experiences, and I've learned to reduce the extent to which I allow the mind to have those negative experiences. So I think that this is the most valuable and practical outcome of a kind of awakening that many have had. Many have it quite naturally, but in my case, perhaps partly because of writing about science as a newspaper journalist, and also the atmosphere of newspapers, very competitive, quite ego-driven, and buying into the materialistic scientific story that matter is everything really, and mind is just a phenomenon that arose after billions of years of evolution through the complexity of the brain. That's how I used to think, and I think that's a very disempowering idea actually now. So I'd like to put that on the table right at the beginning, and we'll see where we go from there. But be interested to hear what Prashant has to say on this.
Thanks, Neville. It sounds like we should change the title to Understanding the Self, in a sense, rather than Understanding the Mind. And then you're free from this, I guess you want to call it duality of positive, negative.
Yes, you can't understand or manage the mind without understanding that inner self that is actually not physical. There is a paradigm in science now they call the post-materialist paradigm, post-materialist science. They sometimes call it the consciousness-based paradigm, which says that mind is primary and the material world is secondary. And it's something that esoteric teachers throughout the millennia have taught. But science, and the greatest scientists, the early scientists, Newton, Faraday, people like that, they very much realized that there was a dimension beyond matter. And they were profoundly spiritual, actually, and they gained many of their insights through that sense that that the ideas came into their brains and their bodies to be communicated. But they had a sense that that these ideas, these breakthroughs, came from a deeper dimension. But as as science became more and more successful in managing the material side of things, I think as a people, pretty widespread in the world today, I think most of the assumptions behind the articles you'll read in newspapers, the discussions you'll hear on TV or on the radio, almost all have behind them this materialistic scientific worldview, which, as I say, I think now, having believed in that very strongly and believed that it was a very ethical approach to life, because it would do away with superstition and religiosity and dogma and hypocrisy, which was my view of the spiritual domain previously. But I think now I threw the baby out with the bathwater, to use that horrible expression, and that really to reconnect with spirit is absolutely vital to managing the mind and understanding it.
It seems like as a society, we're almost being forced to look at it in a funny kind of way because of mental health problems. And it's great now that we are having more access and exposure to meditation. And there are solutions which may be met by them rather than the idea of putting drugs or so. But it's actually very exciting. And you reminded me of an article I saw in The Guardian this week by a neuroscientist titled, "We Risk Not Understanding the Central Mystery of Life." And it becomes, it's very empowering as opposed to this materialistic model of, shut doors and we are sort of not in control perhaps of, or have the ability to be in control of the mind. It's something just happening, chemicals. So when there's a mystery of life, then, and of course, there are lots of repercussions, as you said, the ideas in science, they may be reinforcing quite a disempowering idea. So be really lovely to hear what comes up for Prashant on this, and feel free if you want to kind of give an overview from your perspective as well.
Sure, and hello to Neville and hello to Sarah. I feel this the subject of mind is fascinating. Subject of the self is nice, it is on its own right, but just what you said just now, Sarah, this is like a central mystery of life. But because it is such a abstract thing, not many know about this phenomena of mind. In one gathering, we were talking to faculty of psychology in the university, and some discussion. And at one point, we said, "Let us create 2 minutes of silence and meditation." And after 2 minutes, one lady got up and she said, to tell you the truth, we don't know about our own minds. We know the theories and we know the knowledge and we know the statistics, but we don't know about mind. We are psychologists, we are professors in this department. And she gave a short little lecture to everyone else, and others are nodding. And this is with the psychology department. In the medical training, if you spend 7 years in your basic training, you spend hardly 2 weeks in the department of psychology or psychiatry. So little, because these questions don't come in examinations. And even if they are to treat or they are to teach, there are no one knows. If the psychology department themselves say we don't know, so how can medical world can teach others about the mind? one nice model that I like to use to understand this, it is not the mind itself. Mind is neutral. That is what I like the model. It's just like a stage. But who is using the mind? That makes the difference. That analogy Neville used, two wolves and which one you feed. And I like this image that is used in this country. There is an angel on one side and there is a devil on one side. Except that this devil has got many heads, and these different heads, they are constantly having needs. The problem with this devil, the real issue of the devil, he is not just bad. His main problem is mad. It is, sad, bad, and mad. But amongst that, the mad is the big part. That means there is a confusion. He approaches this world with his innate confusion, something that is blatantly temporary. He wants to create attachments and want to hold on to it forever. This is like a basic problem of this side of us, and when we go in that direction, hoping that okay, it is temporary. We just at this, for the time being, at least there is some kind of a comfort and security, and go for this temporary supports. We get dragged more and more, and these 10 heads of this devil, they get bigger, and they are then dominating the mind. This is the trap human race is in. It is not the mind. Mind is neutral, as we said at stage. And where does the spirituality come in? Spirituality says, let us work with the angel. There is an angel there, and the angel is bypassed by these 10 heads, and we have to make him stronger, nourish him in a sensible way, because these 10 heads of devil, they all are, there is confusion, but there is one cleverness. They know to pretend to be an angel also. They can come with wings and talk the right language. So they know to survive. In other words, these just a ant and insect, cockroach, everyone, they are absolute. Their skill is how to survive, and same thing with these devils, 10 heads. They want to survive. But that is the game, and if we somehow understand this game there and try to nourish the angel, make it stronger, and make these 10 heads smaller, the game can change in a big way. It is a change that we will see on a day-to-day basis. It is a instant change. I also want to say that this side of us, the lower side, it presents with the mindset of a beggar, slave, and a victim. This is like it is hardwired. We say devil is not just bad and wicked. That is maybe in an extreme level it may present like that, but its normal presentation is a constant beggar. He constantly wants more and more. Whatever you give, you may ask someone what he wants. Give him 3 times more. He wants more. And that is what the sign of this devil is. It is hardwired to be a beggar, and all the beggar syndrome, comparison, competition, and disappointments, and desires that is going with that. The victim, it is constantly seeing itself as a potential victim. Someone can say a word, he can be a victim, he sees himself as a victim. If not today, tomorrow I will be a victim. And a victim mentality looks for the dangers. So it ignores all the good things going on in your life. It picks up what is negative, because it is hardwired to look for dangers. And we said the slave becoming dependent on things, dependent on others. This is the innate personality of the devil. And as if this devil, the beggar and the victim and the slave is allowed to use the mind. They are competing amongst themselves to use the mind. If that is the choice given to them, we have the option to shift to a completely different level. Angel, who is free from this whole mentalities and operate from the position of fullness, and never a victim, and never a beggar, never a slave, and never. He is not even the slightest victim for any reason. His thinking and understanding itself is different. And the shift, the angel means he definitely is rich in head and rich in heart. As we said, the devil first problem is confusion. It is opposite for the angel. And we have the option to start, even 1 second, 1 minute at that level is a precious time used. Maybe it would be nice to hear. And maybe one request, since it is a very interesting subject, I want to encourage all of at least those who are interested to come on the camera. It becomes more engaging, and for others also becomes more interesting.
Thank you, Prashant. And I underlined this point you made, the mind is neutral. And I think that needs to sink in, because think of our language. We say, do you mind? It doesn't come across as neutral in our language. We say never mind, as if it's like something wrong potentially. And so the description of the beggar, slave, victim is it's very vivid, but of course begging for someone to approve or some self-respect from something outside. So no wonder if we've got these two sides, if that devil's side with its different options and faces, we are trying to sort of block the mind, numbing out with all kinds of things. We could even be sort of constantly on Zoom talks even, and so we don't give ourselves space to think, So if you're here for that, that's fine. But can we use the material and use it to empower ourselves? So it'd be lovely to hear what comes up for Neville.
Well, very much. I was very much relating to it when Prashant was talking about that neediness and how that makes you. I think it's a brilliant metaphor. The slave. What did you say? The slave, the victim. A dependency that is definitely there when we have not understood the mind. I think in my own experience is that I wouldn't say that my mind was neutral. I'd say that it has a kind of neutral base, but that it actually changes according to how I use it in its predispositions. This would be my feeling. So it might start out neutral, a bit like a field of snow, but then once you start deep snow, someone walks through it, it makes it easier to walk along the same track the next time you cross the field. And in that way, different from having been a kind of neutral territory, I feel that we do develop these predispositions, and they become negative when we lose contact with the core of our being, which I think is humane. I think it has a positive quality to it. I think the mind, as used by someone with a pure heart and uncontaminated by this, a bit like that angel that Prashant was talking about. If that angel were using the mind, that angel would be using the mind in very positive ways, as Prashant was describing. But I feel that maybe we all begin our journey with those angelic qualities, because I don't think nature makes us in our confused and complicated and often sorrowful form. I think nature equips us with predispositions that are beautiful. In our deepest selves, we just love and give, and there's nothing of the slave or the victim or the dependency. And so in those circumstances, the mind is not, I mean, it's there, but it's being used. The mindset, as you called it, is actually a very positive one. But the understanding I've taken on board over time is that over long periods of time, for some of us, maybe involving many lifetimes, because I've also now got a very strong sense that consciousness is unlike matter, is indestructible, eternal, immortal. We are immortal. And there are times when we are not actually expressing ourselves. We're like a seed that is awaiting the time to express itself. But while we are actually on the stage of the material world, we evolve, and we begin, contrary to a lot of materialistic scientific understanding that nature read in tooth and claw, and the survival of the fittest and all this sort of thing. I think we begin our journeys with a truth that original template predisposes us to love and peace and harmony, and that is our real nature underneath everything else. Even now, when the mixture and confusion have been overlaid on it, underneath everything that is there, and that is the basic template of the mind. But I also feel that over time, these other tendencies, as we have gradually lost sight of that original condition because of life becoming more complicated, perhaps more of a struggle for survival. Once we have started to deviate from that original purity of consciousness, there's a tendency for that to continue to develop. So as I indicated, if I've gone down a track of negativity in order to protect myself, a little bit perhaps initially because of fear, then that tendency will actually predispose me to make it more likely that I will respond in those negative ways subsequently. And I think it takes an awful lot to turn that round. I don't think you can just invoke the original angelic qualities because of the change actually taking place within the mind. It's rather like in quantum theory, where the wave function that describes the range of possibilities of where a particle might manifest, if you look for it, it changes. But it's a mathematical term that it's most likely that it will appear here. it's less likely that it will appear there, and it's extremely unlikely that it will appear on the other side of the universe. But these possibilities are described by in quantum theory very clearly before matter manifests at its primary level, in the particulate level. And I think our minds are rather similar, that the more we have used them in a particular way, we will carry tendencies to use the mind in those ways. And that's why, in my view, it takes a very special connection to truth in order to overcome those tendencies. And for me, having been a hardline atheist previously, as I indicated, I had such a distaste for what I saw as, I mean, I've always respected people like monks and nuns. I could see there's something very pure in that, but conventional religion I saw as just being used for selfish purposes, for abusing people sometimes, for power games, for justifying imperialistic ambitions, many misuses of religion. So I was a deep atheist. But now, through experience, I've learned that there is a kind of seed that is not human in a sense. It's something that lies beyond this material world, but is like a reference point for our original condition, that angel quality that Prashant spoke of. And it's, for me, meditation works most powerfully once I understood that and experienced that. I didn't really get that, I feel, for many years because of the tendencies towards thinking in materialistic ways being so strong. I couldn't just I would hear things like, you're an angel, New Age tells me that, you're this wonderful person, we're all one kind of thing. But I couldn't do it. Maybe some can, and I think they do. People perhaps who's less of that impurity inside their minds. But for me, it's the connection to that non-physical source, that highest entity that holds the blueprint of my original nature. And invoking the connection with that relationship is what has really started to make a big difference for me.
Thank you so much for the honest sharing and this very empowering image you gave at the end of a blueprint. And it's like this, you mentioned as well, I think a reference point. It feels very grounding. The premise, at least, that this is how we start. And certainly it feels very comfortable to take this notion. And for myself, it was also more experiential, like a return to something that I knew but had forgotten, which is the most weird thing to be reunited with. So weird meaning, what a strange thing to happen, to disconnect from this original state. But then you also shared a lot about the challenges, and it's not, we are just speaking words, but to actually do it. So I think it would be nice to hear, Prashant, what is the process of this reawakening of the angel on the other shoulder? What are the challenges, and how would you say they can be overcome?
Sure. Just as you have one kind of weather, and it promotes daffodils. You get spring and you get daffodils and flowers, and another kind of climate, another temperature, another weather. You don't get daffodils, you may get weeds or cactus. Something similar happens here for us. One kind of environment promotes this lower side within us, and we have the option. What was mentioned, Neville mentioned, that if you create the environment of knowledge, it's the truth. These are the sort of areas where we may have to explore. If you maybe external, but we definitely have the option to create our inner environment of knowledge. So mind is seeing this world with a different model, with a different intellect. Yes, we use the language. This whole physical world is a theater, drama, a story. So everything becomes small. Nothing becomes intense and serious and obsessive because it is a story and it is small. And in that environment, you stop the ignorance. The devil cannot flourish in that environment. You are seeing the bigger map and understanding the immortality. You are exploring that, seeing this world from that position, and that favors the angel. It is like create an environment of darkness that favors one thing, create an environment of light, it favors something else. Even at the physical level, you create an environment of darkness, it favors insects and cockroaches, they all come out. Robbers will also come out. They will come out in the dark, except Cambridge. They also come during the day. But, but here, you create an environment of light, the dawn comes, you get a different scene, different environment. Those who come out is different. This here, we need the light of knowledge, and this is in our hands. We may not be able to bring up the angel, by order, but we can promote the environment, and that favors the angel.
I like that a lot. Yeah, that idea of promoting an environment, and I think it's a difference between maybe, one of the things I've noticed about Prashant over the years is he's a really good teacher, and a good teacher can take people step by step towards a goal. As a journalist, I've never really learned the teaching skills that much. I can articulate things, I can go into the depths of things, at least try to give a take on that, report quickly. Things like that have formed a part of my background. And so I've never really felt myself to be much of a teacher in the spiritual territory either, but partly also because of being a very slow learner. So my experience has focused me more on this kind of ultimate connection. I feel as if I didn't really get it for many years, but when the penny dropped that I really am that consciousness, and that now there are mixed tendencies in my consciousness, but I came from a source that was absolutely pure and true to who I am really. I'm like a child of that one, or offspring of that source. It's as if there's a pure consciousness that out of which other threads of consciousness dissociate. And there's a very interesting discussion, since we're looking at this whole thing of understanding the mind. Of course, famously, Stephen Hawking ended one of his books with, if we understand, he's saying if physicists can crack this, we can understand this, we'll understand the mind of God. He was actually an atheist. That was an expression that made his book very popular, but it wasn't really a real expression of a recognition of the divine. But there is a dimension of mind that is making things work at every level. I think the cockroaches have minds, fleas have minds, as well as birds and dolphins and flowers. There's a spark of consciousness in all living things. It's like they all have their own little blueprint. Humans, I think, are special. The complexity of our capacity as human souls is enormous. And of course, we've got that complexity is reflected in the huge capacity of our brains and the variety of things that our bodies can learn to do. We're absolutely extraordinary creatures within this planet and this world, but other aspects of all of this have mind-like qualities behind them as well. That's where the new paradigm is taking the scientists, to understand that nature has a mind. You know, there's a kind of overall mind within which all these different manifestations occur, whether it's like the truth of humans living out of their truth or out of their falsehood, but also, you know, nature herself. I mean, we're recognizing now that human activity is putting tremendous pressure on the planet. But there's you probably heard of the Gaia hypothesis that James Lovelock put forward decades ago, that the Earth itself is like a living organism with a mind to it that will put things right, will bring things into balance as much as it can. But it looks like right now, and I think Lovelock has spoken about this, that our activity is sort of breaking the homeostatic mechanisms that keep the planet healthy. But all of this is happening at the level of mind. And so it's not just our minds that are involved in this. Our consciousness is affecting the consciousness from which the wider material world is also manifesting. Just thinking this way, I think, is very empowering as well, because I don't think we can find answers to environmental degradation and so forth by trying to fix it out there. I don't believe that can work, actually. I think it has to be a change in our minds that contributes to that change, that will then change in nature's own consciousness, of which we are a part, an important part. And then that consciousness will manifest a better world. What do you think, Prashant, about that idea? You know, mind is more than human minds. There is something much deeper, isn't there?
Yeah, and also the connection that exists, you know, between the minds, and which is beyond the materialistic limitations. And the intelligence, you may use the word mind in this planet and the larger level, but certainly as if there is an intelligence somewhere. You know, things happen, you know, you don't know where that intelligence comes from, whether it is our collective mind working, you know, because I tend to feel mind is at a living, you know, not at a material level. Stones don't have a mind, you know, there is the living being that has mind, you know, but this, at the same time, we see this collective intelligence working, you know, as if the nature is having its own, you know, direction.
I want to bring in on this topic Rupert Sheldrake, who some of you may have heard, but nomorphic resonance idea, which he defines as if a mysterious telepathic type interconnection between organisms and of collective memories within species. And as he's done over about maybe more than 3 decades of research. And one book is How Dogs Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, and how people know when someone is staring at them. But there was a very interesting talk recently on Scientific Medical Network, and very fascinating, simple experiments which pertain to a kind of collective learning, that when a group of people have grasped something, it makes it more accessible for others. And for spirituality and self-realization and awakening this angel on the right shoulder, probably. It's quite hopeful, and as you last said, Neville was saying, you know, a sort of a transformation which we really want to move towards. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. It's quite a hopeful message. If Neville wanted to share, or Prashant, whichever.
Yeah, there's a saying, when we change, the world changes. And it's a beautiful saying, because it means that even though the change may be small in response to my particular change, but drop by drop, waves can develop, and then eventually you can have a sort of quantum leap into something quite different. You remember catastrophe theory? There's a lot of interest in the mathematical field. They called it catastrophe theory, where things would build up, and then they'd reach a certain point where suddenly there was a tremendous shift. They called it catastrophe theory, but it was just shift theory, really. And I think that we're in an era where something of that sort is underway. People are awakening. There's a lot of darkness still, and the ill consequences of it are very evident. I see the whole COVID thing as a consequence of this darkness. Didn't jump across from the animals. It was very clearly something that was genetically engineered, and then the mishandling of it, where, you know, in so many ways have made things 1,000 times worse than if we'd accepted that there was an unpleasant virus doing the rounds and tried to protect the most vulnerable. But instead we've, you know, just poured billions into the hands of testing and vaccine companies, and it's a terrible disaster, actually. So I have a feeling that disasters like this are going to accelerate the process of awakening, where people will see that the scientific materialism, as opposed to science as a method of understanding fully and honestly, but scientific materialism is a what do you call it, a spent whatever. I think it is really. As I say, I used to respect it so much, and yet now I feel as if it leads us more and more down the garden path towards darkness, because its focus is so externalized. You know, the scientist thinks that the only reality is what he can measure and repeat and demonstrate and have his peers review his findings. It's all out there. But that focus on the inner being is discouraged, actually. I'm not saying that all scientists are out of touch with the inner being. There are many wonderful people within the world of science, but there's a tendency within this belief system of materialism and materialistic science, which has been so successful, as I said, at the material level. There's a tendency for us to put more and more faith in that, and move more and more away from practices of the kind that Prashant was describing, ways of understanding, ways of creating environments in which we can nourish that truth that waits inside us. In that sense, I completely agree that it is there waiting for us, but it needs more. Most of us need more stimulus, more of a push to really make the effort to move in that direction. And my feeling is that within this great play that Prashant spoke of, I have a feeling that actually nature has this in hand. I'm not despairing at all. I have the feeling that the dynamics of going deeper into the dark actually also will push humanity, which has so much great potential, will push humanity into a process of reawakening that will then bring, you know, a fresh start to things. So that's my take on Rupert Sheldrake's understandings. And I met him many years ago. He was very upset about the the way the scientific world responded like religious leaders to his theory. When he wrote his first book, A New Science of Life, the editor of Nature at the time, which was a top science journal, wrote an editorial on it, dismissing it, and the headline on the editorial was "A Book Fit for Burning." Now, if that isn't straight out of, the old church with its power games and intolerance, what is? And that's the problem with science today, that there's too much of that kind of narrowness. And in my view, the materialism encourages that. But one more thing to tell you about Rupert's ideas. I never told him this, but I've been a student for decades with the Brahma Kumaris Spiritual University. They've been my teaching, main source of my teaching, my colleagues on the spiritual journey. And their headquarters is in Mount Abu in Rajasthan, and there's a big monkey colony there, lots of monkeys. You always see them when you're climbing up the mountain in the taxi or whatever. And years back, I was listening at night to the World Service, and a scientist was on. Was a woman who'd been out to study the monkey community in Mount Abu. And she said it was unique in the world in that the females actually held leadership roles within this monkey community. The men were secondary, the male monkeys were secondary to the females. And the Brahma Kumaris headquarters is there. And the Brahma Kumaris, I think, is the biggest, certainly the biggest, and probably one of the first spiritual training organizations, religious, teaching organizations led by women. If that isn't a beautiful proof of Rupert III Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance, I don't know what is. I really ought to tell him about it sometime. I thought I was dreaming, when I woke up the next day. I thought I must have dreamed that I listened to that. It just didn't seem as if it could really be so true. But the next time I was in Mount Abu, I asked if anyone had met this scientist, and one of the senior yogis living there said, "Oh yes, she came and visited us." And I said, "Did she know about, your female?" "Oh no, we didn't talk about that."
It's fascinating. What comes up for Prashant on this subject?
And I would like to bring in another angle, and that is, many of us may have some issues with life and mind, and we want to address that in different ways. And the present system of therapy, and at least some system, they go into the details, go into the history of this, and they stir it up. That style actually promotes the environment that doesn't feed the angel. We said earlier, you see it as a story. What happened yesterday, it was a story. It finishes there. I don't have to go and analyze it too much. It was in the story, there is no logic, and there is no, some great, reasons behind. That is the way the script is. And if you approach that way, it finishes, it gives chance for the new start, and the angel flourishes. When there is a structure and system and therapies where you are focusing on some little thing of the past and going into it, that is exactly what the devil wants, because it gives attention to that area, and temporarily it might have some kind of relief, but it actually feeds the devil. It will continue and create problem down the line. Just another angle to this subject of the mind, which may be important.
It's really important. I agree, Prashant. And it's something that I wasn't really clear about again until fairly recently. I think you can waste a lot of energy in thinking I've got to fight this tendency. I mustn't be so egotistical, or, I get angry about things. And you beat yourself up about it. You're just adding to the negative, the negativity within the wolf that is hungry for that negativity, whether it's outwardly expressed or inwardly expressed. The wolf doesn't distinguish, he just grows bigger on that diet. So definitely, I'm really with you on that. And it's one of the reasons why I feel that this relationship with that source is so powerful, because the way I've understood it is, and I kind of really didn't, I just thought it was a nice idea for a long time, but more recently, for whatever reason, it's become very real for me, just to be able to go inside and feel as if somewhere and somehow I am able to connect to that beautiful, powerful, loving, peaceful, wise entity. And that if I remember, I do it precious little of the day, but if I remember to do that, it's as if that charges me very well. It's like a rapid download of the positive stuff, and it empowers the positive wolf and helps me to send the other stuff packing. So I really agree with you on that very much. Another way of looking at it, which I heard a friend express recently, was it's the difference between improving and empowering. And that same friend was speaking about how she is looking to make what she called it, not a quantum leap, but she called it a quantum something. Anyway, whether it's really related to quantum theory or not, that feeling that you can leave one direction of mind totally and flip to a quantum flip. That was it. That was the expression she used. Flip to a different consciousness where you're not engaging with worry and recrimination or need for forgiveness or saying sorry or any of those things, actually. Of course, they have their place in improving our behavior and making the world a little bit better, but for real re-empowerment as opposed to improving somewhat. I think that this quantum flip is a really nice idea, and you articulated it very nicely.
It's interesting how this atmosphere of upliftment, and when Neville was speaking as well, I was thinking of the atmosphere of upliftment and also a community, as well as that inward, but also others seeing us in that more elevated way, that sort of inner angel, whether it be maybe Zoom, but if possible, a community, then this negativity loses power. But I would like to ask Prashant, I know we're coming to time, but just if you wanted to say a few words for someone who is new to these ideas, still trying to grapple with the subtlety of it. And maybe sometimes it's misunderstood as like a bypassing, that we're not acknowledging, and many will have this feeling it's normal to be having negative feelings, and we should accept that, and we should accept the good and the bad, and to expect that to be removed is not accurate. And we may be bypassing, they call it spiritual bypassing. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. What all that we are sort of speaking here and emphasizing is to see the bigger map. At present, we are seeing a small part. We said story, but even within the story, get caught into some little episode and get stuck there. We have the option to see the larger map, and we use the language 3 words, and we have the intellect and the sight to see that, then we at least we should make that effort to see the bigger reality. And in the context, we can see what is happening and why it is happening. You will have a different perspective. Just as if I was to see just the tail of the elephant, as opposed to I see the whole elephant, then my understanding changes. So it is not bypassing. You are not bypassing anything. You are just going into the understanding things, in a true sense, approaching it with wisdom, truth, and as was mentioned before, and that innate nature of everyone is good, and we rediscover something that is innately beautiful.
Feels like it reflects back to what Neville was sharing about accepting this consciousness, this pure original experience, and then the other threads of consciousness we are naturally able to disassociate. We realize that's not defining us. And really lovely if Neville would like to share any final thoughts or anything you'd like to add.
Not really. Just how important it is, what you've highlighted there, Sarah. We can waste so much time and energy trying to fix things, rather than transcend the present reality. I think there is an element where people who have gone deeply into the dark, as I feel I had, sometimes an element of bypassing that stuff may be just one way forward. It's not adequate. I just see that the difference between how I am now with this sort of shift that's happened of understanding that inner being and its source, that's really kind of become a part of my nature. Before that happened, when I began this journey, because I had such a scientific worldview, a materialistic scientific worldview, sort of embedded in both in my predispositions and in my brain, I found it very difficult to understand concepts like soul and deeper dimensions, all of this stuff. But there was part of me resonated with it and loved it, and felt that it led to people who held these understandings living with qualities that were becoming very in short supply in my own life. And that's what made me start the journey. And I used to joke that I'd had an intellect bypass operation because my intellect was filled with this materialistic model. But in order to be able to make some progress, I would put that on one side while I was sitting with the yogis to hear what they had to say, or sit in meditation to practice a different experience. But still, I have that said, I feel that to make the jump, not to think that you've got to have a sort of process and that you're going to buy. Ultimately, the aim is to become a really integrated person where your spirit, your mind, your intellect, your brain, your body, your heart, your feelings are all kind of take you in one direction. And that is a fabulous goal. And it may take time, but it's a fabulous goal. And we shouldn't lose sight of it whilst, dealing with little obstacles that come along in the way.
Very beautifully put. I really love this. I think it was Anthea Church wrote in one of her books about Raj Yoga. I lay these ideas alongside my life while I test my own integrity. So it's sort of like, in the way you put it, it's like you put ideas to one side, but that's quite knowledgeably done. And then you explore this view and then be objective. And this but clear goal of the integrated self has a real very high energy about it. So it's a very, something to sort of get one's mind and heart and everything into. So Prashant, any final thoughts from yourself? And if you want to share a few words you mentioned earlier about this angel using the mind, if you want to share a few words that may sort of be like an experiment, meditation experiment for us.
Sure. Maybe I will go for that meditation, words that lead to that. And we mentioned about creating the right environment. The easy way to create this environment is use the best sight and best intellect. We have it, we just need to use it. And with this, we are seeing the physical world for what it is. If the physical world, our association with it is temporary, we accept this is a temporary world for us. And that we are travelers and guests in this physical world. And that is fine. With this spiritual sight, we can see this guest as an invisible guest. The soul, invisible soul, is the invisible guest at this physical level. In being a guest, he owns nothing here. He can lose nothing. He owns no one. He loses no one. He doesn't own a single atom. He is aware of it, he is happy with it. Doesn't own a single atom at this level. He's got nothing to lose. That's why never a victim. Naturally, you find this space where this invisible traveler is free from the beggar and the victim. Never a beggar, never a victim. On the contrary, he finds, like any guest or any tourist, every moment is a gift. As it comes, he has that sense of wonder and appreciation and gratitude. Invisible soul is the invisible traveler, is the invisible guest, is the invisible observer. He is happy to come, happy to live. The spiritual side helps him to understand his world beyond his home. As we continue on our journey, we remind ourselves often the beautiful truth of the invisible traveler.
Thank you so much. This feels like a place to stay in some silence and go through this, some of what's shared. And we will share the recording on the website. We'll just post the link, and you can get access to the next talk. So may I take this opportunity to give a very big thank you to all of you, because this creates such an atmosphere, a positive environment to promote this this upliftment, and it feels like a collective thing for sure. So it's very tangible, and special thanks to Neville and Prashant for sharing today on this topic in such a rich way. So look forward to connecting again, and we will be meeting next week, and the topic of healing relationships. So once we are healed the mind, and then we are healing relationships, seems like a natural progression. So we're going to listen to some music from the place near the female-led monkey tribe, or otherwise known as Mount Tabu. Our artist, David, who's composing very beautiful music. So we will connect with you soon. See you next time.